Where's the beef?
Some hamburger places give you a lot less beef on a lot of bun.
Where's the beef? Where's the...
There was a time when people didn't always reach for the remote when the commercials came on. Sometimes, the commercial was the part everyone remembered. They had characters you recognized, lines you repeated at school, jingles that stayed in your head for years, and little stories that could make an entire family laugh in 30 seconds. And if you grew up watching American television in the 1960s, 70s, or 80s, some of these may come back to you before we even reach the punchline. A Volkswagen funeral, a nervous driving instructor, a monk with 500 copies to make, and, of course, one unforgettable question: where's the beef? These weren't just advertisements. For millions of Americans, they became part of everyday life. So settle in and see how many you remember. Here are 14 of the funniest classic American commercials that have all but disappeared from television. 1. Volkswagen funeral.
Finally, to my nephew Harold, who oft-times said, "A penny saved is a penny earned," and who also oft-times said, "Gee, Uncle Max, it sure pays to own a Volkswagen. I leave my entire fortune of $100 billion."
If you remember Volkswagen advertising from this era, you already know they rarely sold cars the way everyone else did. No roaring engine, no glamorous driver, no long stretch of open highway. Instead, this commercial begins with a funeral. A line of black cars slowly follows the hearse, as a wealthy man's will is read aloud. One relative is remembered for spending too much. Another gets almost nothing out. And then we hear about the nephew who was careful with his money. The nephew who drove a Volkswagen. You can probably guess who ends up with the inheritance. It's dry, quiet humor, the kind Volkswagen became famous for. And the remarkable thing is how little the commercial actually has to say about the car. Everybody watching already understands the message. A Volkswagen didn't announce how wealthy you were. It suggested you were sensible enough not to waste your money. For people who saw this one when it was new, even the opening funeral procession can bring the whole joke rushing back. 2. Alka-Seltzer. Poached oysters.
I told you, my darling, it was perfect. Just perfect.
Let's see, what would you like for tomorrow? Stuffed crab surprise. Cream duck delight. Is it beginning to rain, dear?
No.
Marshmallowed meatballs. Sweet and sour snails. Yum.
Some commercials stay in your memory because of a slogan. Others stay because you once knew somebody exactly like the people in them. Here we have a newly married couple. The wife is eager to prove herself in the kitchen. Her husband is eager to prove that he's a supportive husband. Unfortunately, those two goals are beginning to conflict. He politely survives one experimental dinner while quietly reaching for the Alka-Seltzer. Then she starts describing what she plans to cook next. Marshmallowed meatballs, sweet and sour snails, and, after misreading the recipe, something involving poached oysters. Watch the husband's face. There's no big performance. Just the expression of a man realizing that marriage may require more courage than he expected. That's what made these Alka-Seltzer commercials so good. They took ordinary domestic life, dinner, marriage, indigestion, and turned it into a tiny situation comedy. And for many viewers, the actors themselves are another surprise. That suffering young husband would later be familiar to movie audiences as Terry Kaiser. But here, he's simply a newlywed trying very hard to survive dinner. 3. Wendy's. Where's the beef?
It's a very big fluffy bun.
Where's the beef?
Some hamburger places give you a lot less beef on a lot of bun.
Where's the beef?
At Wendy's, we serve a ham modestly called a single. And Wendy's single has more beef than the Whopper or Big Mac. At Wendy's, you get more beef and less bun.
Hey, where's the beef?
You don't really have to introduce this one. For a while, you could hear these 3 words almost anywhere in America. 3 elderly women are studying a hamburger from a fictional competitor. The bun is enormous. They admire it. They turn it around. They talk about how impressively large it looks. Then they open it. And inside is a tiny hamburger patty. Clara Peller stares at it. and asks the question that became much bigger than the commercial itself. Where's the beef? If you were around when this campaign was running, you probably remember people saying it everywhere. At work, at school, at the dinner table, and often in situations that had absolutely nothing to do with hamburgers. That's when you know an advertisement has become something else. Clara wasn't a glamorous spokesperson. She sounded like somebody's grandmother who had been kept waiting too long. And that was exactly why America loved her. Decades later, people still quote the line, "You can't ask much more from a 30-second commercial." 4. Continental Insurance, Lucky Guy.
The top of the table, that knocked the radio, that scared the dog, that bumped the chair, that shoved the piano, that collapsed the wall, that belonged to the lucky guy who was insured by Continental Insurance. Continental doesn't just insure the ordinary things that can happen. We can even insure the things that just can't happen. But they do.
Some of you may recognize this poor man before you recognize the insurance company. That's Dick Wilson, the actor millions of Americans knew as Mr. Whipple from the Charmin commercials. But today, Mr. Whipple is having a very bad day. One disaster follows another. Property damage, accidents, a piano where a piano definitely should not be. And through all of it, the commercial keeps treating him as one very lucky fellow. Why? Because he's insured. It's a simple joke, but it tells you everything the company wants you to know without turning into a lecture about policies and coverage. And listen carefully to the ending. You're told to find your Continental agent in the yellow pages. For younger viewers, that's almost as historical as the commercial itself. But for anyone who remembers looking up a plumber, a restaurant, or an insurance agent in that enormous phone book, one little line can bring back an entire part of everyday American life. Sometimes the smallest details take you back the farthest. 5. Independent life. Out of the picture.
You've both worked hard to establish a wonderful way of life. But what if one of you were no longer in the picture?
Life insurance has never been the easiest thing to advertise. The subject itself is serious. So, independent life took a familiar expression and made it literal. What happens when someone is suddenly out of the picture? The commercial begins with the kind of comfortable American family scene that appeared everywhere in advertising during this period. A house, a lawn, a family, everything looks secure. Then, the idea changes. Remove one person from that picture, and suddenly the future looks very different. The joke softens the message without hiding it. And if you've seen this commercial before, there's a good chance the life insurance message isn't the first thing you remember. You may remember the lawn decorations. Those strange little fountains have probably caused more double takes over the years than anyone involved in the commercial ever expected. That's another pleasure of watching these old ads again. Sometimes you notice details you never saw the first time, and once you notice them, you can't unsee them. 6. Pepsi, Archaeology.
Professor! What is it?
Odd.
What is it?
I've no idea.
Pepsi, the choice of a new generation.
This one takes us into the future to make a joke about the past. Archaeologists are exploring the remains of 20th century America. To them, our everyday objects are ancient mysteries. Then someone uncovers an old soda bottle. The students gather around it. They study the logo. They have no idea what it is. The forgotten drink? Coca-Cola. That's the whole joke. Pepsi imagines a future where its biggest competitor has disappeared so completely that Coke is now something archaeologists have to identify. It was playful, competitive advertising on a grand scale. And if you remember the Cola Wars, you remember how seriously both companies took this rivalry. They compared taste. They compared generations. They compared lifestyles. And here, Pepsi decided to compare historical survival. You didn't have to believe the prediction to enjoy the joke. The fun was seeing one giant American brand tease another giant American brand right there on national television. Commercials could be surprisingly bold when the competition was this personal. 7. Alka-Seltzer, spicy meatball.
Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball.
Cut.
What was the matter with that?
The accent.
Cut.
Cut.
Measy, micey, ballsy, ballsy.
Cut. Take 59.
Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball.
Cut.
There are certain lines that don't need a commercial around them anymore. This is one of them. A television actor is trying to film a food commercial. All he has to do is take a bite of a meatball and deliver his line. Simple enough. Except the director wants another take. Then another. And another. By the time they reach take 50-something, our poor spokesman has eaten far more meatballs than anyone should. And then comes the line, "Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball." For many Americans, that phrase took on a life of its own. People repeated it at dinner. Parents said it, kids said it, and judging by how often the line still comes up today, plenty of families never completely stopped. What made the commercial especially clever was that it was an advertisement about making an advertisement. The repeated takes cause the indigestion. The indigestion sells the Alka-Seltzer. Everything fits, and more than half a century later, serve something spicy at the dinner table, and somebody may still know exactly what to say. 8. American Motors Rebel, driving instructor.
A survey of professional driving schools shows that they use more of our cars than any other kind.
How am I doing? A lot better than yesterday.
Turn left.
I can't do it while you're watching me.
Okay, turn left. How does it feel the first time out in traffic, Mr. Moss? Mr. Moss? Mr. Moss?
Anyone who has ever taught a teenager to drive may feel a little sympathy for this man. The student looks pleasant enough, the instructor looks confident enough, and then the lesson begins. The American Motors Rebel lurches through one mistake after another, while the instructor tries to stay calm. Then comes the exchange many viewers never forgot. Look out for that truck. What truck? Behind the bus. What bus? By that point, the driving instructor's expression says everything. It's a perfect way to demonstrate a tough automobile without announcing, "This automobile is tough." If a car can survive a beginner driver, maybe it can survive anything. And for viewers who actually learn to drive in cars like these, big steering wheels, bench seats, manual transmissions, there's another level to the joke. You don't just remember the commercial, you remember learning to drive, or teaching your own children, and suddenly that terrified instructor looks very familiar indeed. 9. Southern Airways, second class.
Second cabin, please.
Southern Airways believes that no man should be subjected to the indignity of being labeled.
Look at the inside of that airplane for a moment. Before we even get to the joke, some viewers may be thinking the same thing. Look at all that room. Air travel felt very different in this period. And Southern Airways built this commercial around the idea that passengers shouldn't feel like second-class citizens simply because they were sitting in the less expensive part of the airplane. The ad takes second class, literally, and exaggerates the difference until it becomes ridiculous. The message was summed up in a line that Southern used proudly. Nobody's second class on Southern. Today, the commercial is funny for reasons its creators probably never intended. The clothes, the cabin, the food, the service, even the amount of personal space feels like a glimpse into another world. For people who remember when taking a flight was still something of an occasion, this isn't just an airline commercial. It's a little window into what flying used to feel like. And judging by the comments old airline ads receive, plenty of people wouldn't mind bringing some of that service back. 10. Volkswagen, the Kremplers.
With his money, Mr. Krempler bought himself a new refrigerator, a new range, a new washer, a new dryer, a record player, 2 new television sets, and a brand new Volkswagen. Now Mr. Jones is faced with that age-old problem. Keeping up.
Americans used to talk about keeping up with the Joneses. Volkswagen decided to give the Joneses somebody to worry about. The Kremplers. 2 families have money to spend. One family spends it in the traditional way. The other buys a Volkswagen. And because the Volkswagen costs less, the Kremplers suddenly seem to have money left for everything else. Appliances, televisions, things for the house. Little by little, the Jones family begins looking across the property line and wondering how their neighbors are doing it. For viewers today, one of the funniest parts may simply be the prices. A few $1,000s could buy a Volkswagen and still leave enough money for a surprising amount of household equipment. People who lived through that period don't just see a joke there. They remember what cars cost. They remember what their first house cost. They remember what $3,000 actually meant. That's one reason these old commercials are so powerful. Sometimes they preserve the price of everyday life better than any history book. 11. Wendy's. Drive-through.
At Wendy's, you never have.
Once America met Clara Peller, Wendy's knew better than to leave her sitting at that first hamburger counter, so they brought her back. This time, she goes through the drive-thru, and by now, viewers already know exactly what she's looking for. The wonderful thing about Clara Peller was that she never seemed like a polished advertising personality. There was no show business smile, no perfect delivery. She seemed genuinely impatient, and that made every new situation funnier. Viewers weren't really waiting for another explanation of Wendy's hamburgers. They were waiting for Clara, waiting for that voice, waiting to hear what she would say next. That's something advertising used to do remarkably well. A commercial character could become almost as familiar as somebody from a television series. Mr. Whipple, the Maytag repairman, Clara Peller. You saw them year after year, and when one of them appeared on the screen, you already felt like you knew them. 12. Federal Express. Count on it.
You can't count on anything these days.
Did you type the letter I told you to type?
No.
Before email, before cloud storage, and before you could send a document across the country with one click, getting something somewhere quickly could become a genuine emergency. Federal Express understood that anxiety very well. Their commercials often showed American business moving at a frantic pace. Phones ringing, deadlines approaching, people talking fast, everyone needing something delivered yesterday. The comedy came from the people. They were rushed, worried, overwhelmed, and completely dependent on that package getting where it needed to go. Federal Express positioned itself as the one dependable thing in all that chaos. For anyone who worked in an office during this era, there's plenty here that feels familiar. Paper everywhere, phones with cords, secretaries taking messages, documents that physically had to leave one building and reach another. Today, we can move information around the world almost instantly. Back then, sometimes the fastest technology in the office was an overnight envelope and an airplane, and millions of businesses learned to count on it. 13. Volkswagen Karmann Ghia Barrier.
Economical sports car you can buy. It's just not the most powerful.
If you ever owned a Karmann Ghia, you may already be smiling. It looked like a sports car. It was stylish, low, beautifully shaped, and fast-looking. The important word there is looking. In this commercial, the Karmann Ghia heads straight toward a paper barrier. We know what a sports car is supposed to do. Charge through it. Instead, the paper wins. The car bounces backward. Then comes the wonderfully honest sales message. It may be one of the most economical sports cars you can buy, just not the most powerful. Volkswagen had an unusual gift for turning a weakness into a reason to like the car. They didn't pretend the Karmann Ghia was something it wasn't. That honesty became part of the joke, and part of the charm. Ask someone who owned one, and they'll often tell you the same thing. It wasn't especially fast, but they loved it anyway. And sometimes, that's the kind of car you remember best. 14. Xerox. Brother Dominic.
Brother Dominic, how are you?
Could you do a big job for me?
The Xerox 9200 duplicating system, unlike anything we've ever made, feeds and cycles originals, has a computerized programmer that controls the entire system, can duplicate, reduce, and assemble a virtually limitless number of complete sets, and does it all at an incredible 2 pages per second.
Here are your sets, Father. The 500 sets you asked for.
It's a miracle.
Xerox. Brother Dominic. Some commercials disappear, others become part of advertising history. Brother Dominic belongs in the second group. A medieval monk has just completed a beautiful handwritten manuscript. His superior examines the work and gives him the next assignment. Make 500 copies. For a monk working by hand, that could take forever. But Brother Dominic knows something the others don't. He steps into the modern world, finds a Xerox machine, and returns with 500 perfect copies. The monks stare at the stack in disbelief. And then comes the line everyone remembers. It's a miracle. If you saw this when it originally aired, that joke probably needed no explanation. Photocopying itself still felt like remarkable technology. And look at the Xerox machine. It's enormous, compared with the copiers and printers we use today. That's part of the pleasure of seeing this commercial again. The joke still works. But now the technology itself has become nostalgic. 500 copies once looked like a miracle. Today, most of us would just complain about the paper jam. Looking back at these commercials, maybe the most surprising thing isn't that they're still funny. It's how much we still remember. A voice, a face, a hamburger bun, a frightened driving instructor, a few notes from a jingle. Sometimes that's all it takes. And suddenly you're back in the family living room, watching one of the few channels available, waiting for your favorite show to return. Back then, millions of people often watched the same programs and the same commercials at the same time. So when a line caught on, the whole country seemed to know it. Where's the beef? That's a spicy meatball. It's a miracle. They weren't simply selling hamburgers, medicine, cars, or copying machines. Without anyone realizing it, they were creating shared memories. So which one took you back? And what old commercial have you never forgotten? Tell us in the comments, because there's a good chance somebody else remembers it too. And if you enjoy forgotten places, vintage television, rare photographs, and stories from America's past, subscribe to America's Golden Days. Until next time, keep the memories alive.